been living in my tiny house going on 3 years now. I think that right now it's very trendy, but I do not believe that it is just a fad. I don't think it's going to go away because I see such a massive hunger in certainly all of the West for alternatives. I mean, there literally is no alternative. You look around and there's just houses, lots of them. They're all pretty well exactly the same. And I'm not dissing that at all. I think that everybody needs to live the way they need to live. But if you're looking for something else, if you're trying to either have a smaller ecological footprint, if you're trying to have a lower economic burden, if you're trying to just simplify for whatever reason, I mean, these are really just brilliant options. The fact that they're mobile is incredible. I didn't necessarily think that being mobile was even on my list of pluses. And it's become actually what makes it possible for me to do now what is sustainable. I think that they are not going to disappear because I see the broadening of alternatives. There's just all kinds of people experimenting with all kinds of living right now. And I think we need to. I think we need to start asking questions about why do we live the way we live? You know, how are we using resources? What are we thinking about and expecting from our space? And how are we interacting with the outside world? And how are we interacting with each other? I was actually a film editor in Toronto a long time ago. Moved to Nova Scotia, kind of just became a bit of a serial entrepreneur. So I've had 3 businesses in Nova Scotia since that. I seem to love starting them, and then I run them for 8 or whatever years, and then I sell them. After the sale of my last business here, I decided to go traveling. And when I came back, I really just realized I'd been traveling with such a small amount of stuff, and before I'd left, I'd sold everything. So I was so free and I was so light, and I realized I didn't want to go back at all. You know, I didn't want to buy a house. I didn't want a mortgage. Yeah, I ran into my business partner, James, at a party one night, and he's a great builder, and I asked if he'd like to build me a tiny house, and he said yes. So that's really how this whole craziness started. Me trying to maintain my freedom and my flexibility. Right from when we decided to build mine, we thought, well, let's see if we can make a business of it. And our idea was to build mine, see if there was any interest, see what we learned along the way, and go from there. And it has literally just been steadily one after another ever since, and we're just starting number 9, yeah. This is my living room, and it has this raised floor, so I pretty well live on the floor. I'm very happy on the floor. I know some people would want chairs, and they could have them here, but you know, I kind of live on the floor. And I also do my yoga here, and yeah, I actually eat hanging out here on the floor, and I meditate here on the floor. So this is kind of my hangout space. I sleep up in my groovy little mini loft, which is like a tree house for some reason for me. I love it up there. It's like a little nest. And then my kitchen is kind of the center of my whole tiny house, and it takes up a lot of actual square footage for a tiny house. But I really like food, and I like to cook, so that was important to me. And then I have a bathroom at the front, which is actually quite luxurious for a tiny house bathroom. It's size, and I have my shower and a composting toilet there and a little hand sink. And it also is kind of also turned out to be where I have a lot of clothing. I realized that there was a period where I had to live in my house to learn how to live in my house, you know. Yeah. And I had thought I'd have all my clothing up in the loft, and it wasn't practical at all, you know. And in fact, it turns out that when I'm standing upright and I'm getting dressed is when I'm in the bathroom. You know? Yeah. So, you know, I figured out how to use the space and more efficient. This is what I refer to as my sexy Danish stove. Yeah, it's a morsu. So it comes from Denmark, where they really have got this down pat, this heating with wood business and efficiency, and environmentally very efficient and clean. But it also uniquely allowed us to build with a space of only 5 inches to a combustible surface. So we could have, if we'd put in a heat shield, been even closer. In its design, it has an interior wall, so it actually has its own built-in shield. There's space between 2 walls in it. Yeah, yeah. in a tiny house, you really cannot have a stove that you need like 12 or 14 inches clearance because it would have been sitting here in the middle of the entire house. So yeah, it was an expensive buy, but I love my wood heat and I love my wood stove, and it was able to fit in the corner, so it was the perfect stove, and I do love it, and I've been very happy with it. I'm completely off-grid, so I've got two 250-watt panels that I plug in, and it does me just fine. Yeah, my stove, my oven, and my hot water are all propane. I have an on-demand hot water unit that uses propane, and my little 12-volt Trucker's fridge, all my lights, my exhaust fans, my water pump, and it's all 12-volt DC. But I do have an inverter, and I have some normal plugs so that when I'm like charging my laptop or something, I can just plug in. This one's 8 by 20, and then we built out onto the tongue.
So you obviously have moved it around. So
yes, I move around a fair bit for someone who isn't traveling. Like I move it 2 or 3 times a year, and kind of organically, it has just evolved that I've ended up kind of property sitting. I don't know what to call it, because people have houses, but I don't use their houses because I have my own. So I just arrive on their property, and they're often away for extended periods of time. And then I'm the kind of their eyes and ears on the property, and I keep my eye on things. And for insurance purposes, most people need someone to go through the house every 3 days. So it's just worked out, really well that I can go somewhere and park myself for 3 to 6 months, say, a period of time, and I'm just keeping my eye on things for them, and I just get to get on with my life. It's legal because I'm moving around. It would actually be illegal to park yourself in Nova Scotia in a tiny house and not be hooked up to a septic system. Okay. So it's a whole grey water issue that I'm plated as a travel trailer. So all the kind of officialdom that we deal with is the DMV. So the laws say you can't live in an RV, you can't live in a travel trailer, you can't live in a camper full time in Nova Scotia. So that's what, if you're going to be tagged as a travel trailer and be able to move around, well then you can't live in it. So. Like I said, I had been traveling, and I was very interested in maintaining my freedom and my flexibility. I was aware that my life was still really in transition. So this has just literally completely enabled me to not spend my capital, to not have to work very much, so I can continue doing all the research I've been doing. I'm writing a book about my tiny living situation. To me, the perfect balance is to have the tiny space, but to be able to live the life you want to live in it, So. Well, I do some very kind of boring contemplative things, like I do spend a fair bit of time meditating and doing yoga and writing. So those are all kind of still and silent, but I do a fair bit of sound healing, so I like to do that. And sometimes I just play my instruments. I like to drum a lot. I would say to anyone who is thinking about this that it really does take a certain attitude. It takes a certain openness and curiosity and willingness to experiment. If you go into this thinking that you're going to live just like you did in your apartment or your house, I think you will find yourself up against issues, I think that it is really an alternative way of living, that it will demand a consciousness of you, like an awareness that some people don't want to have to bring to their everyday life. And it also demands really a minimalism. There just literally isn't the room to put a whole bunch of stuff. You just have to design around the reality of your life, like not the fantasy but really what matters to you. What is it you're going to want to need to do in there, and are you going to need to do it in the middle of winter and in the middle of summer? They're a lot like here in Nova Scotia. I think of it as being a lot like a boat, and you want every space to do at least 3 things, and you need it to be very practical and realistic. So for me anyway, the marrying the practical and the realistic with the beautiful was really the goal. You want to really think about why you're doing it, and And sometimes I've spoken to a lot of people in the last year who they're very aware that it will be a transitional thing, that they've got a plan, and that they're going to live in a tiny house for 4 years, pay off all their debt, save this amount of money, then they're going to do this, and I think that is a fantastic, very strategic, intelligent way to go forward for a lot of people in their lives. It's small. The smallness has brought an awareness of a much bigger picture, which is rather paradoxical. I found that I couldn't be unaware of anything in my life, in my surroundings. When you turn a light on, it has an impact on your battery, or that when I run water, it's got to come from somewhere and then it's going to go into my holding tank, and that has to be emptied. And there's just a real kind of connection to the whole system. We've become quite unconscious about the ways we live. So that includes how we eat, how we deal with resources, how we have relationships with each other. I mean, I see around me, even here, a lot of massive houses where people are living very isolated lives. One of the things about my tiny house, I consciously chose not to have a washer and dryer. And that came from a conversation I had with a number of friends, and they said, Dawn, every one of us has a washer and dryer. Like, why don't we do something, more communal? You could come over and cook us lunch or cook us dinner and bring your laundry, and then everyone gets together, we all get to see each other, you get to do your laundry, and you don't have to take up good space in your tiny house doing that, or the power draw that it would have meant. And I found there were many things like that. I made conscious choices to not have certain conveniences. And, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I know there are people out there who'll say, oh, right, so you can just go around mooching off of everyone else. And sure, you can choose to look at it that way. But I have found in every one of those situations that it has only strengthened community. It's forced me to reach out. It's forced me to actually deepen relationships that before were more or less superficial. And I think better and bigger and more beautiful things happen that way, I just wanted to ask what's important and how much is enough. It was shocking how little really became necessary.